Good evening. Thank you everybody that's joined us tonight for our photography and community event. So this is part of Govanhill International Festival and it's Street Level Photoworks launching our Culture Collective programme. So I'm really delighted. I'm Iseult Timmermans. I work at Street Level and I'm delighted to be introducing Basharat and Morwenna Kearsley tonight. They're going to be presenting some talks about their work and practice, and I'll give an overview of their role within the Culture Collective programme. So before I get onto that, for those of you that aren't familiar with Street Level, it's just to say Street Level is celebrating over 31 years of championing photography. We're passionate about creating opportunities for everybody to get involved in a creative programme that connects locally as well as globally. From its inception, Street Level have been a place to exhibit, to learn and to share photography and lens-based media. Engagement has always been the yeast in the bread, as we like to say, not the icing in the cake. We're interested in the transformative role art has in society. We support and encourage artists to challenge us, to feel, to be direct, exploratory, responsive and reflective in the process of engagement. The work that we do is a catalyst for relationship building, sharing skills, stories and histories through creative conversations to empower communities and diverse voices. So just to give a wee bit of context of Street Level's work and what that engagement looks like or has looked like over the last 30 years. So I'm going to start not at the very beginning of Street Level, because like I say, from its inception, it was always a place set up by the Glasgow Photography Group and always a place for sharing, learning and exchanging ideas and skills. The first project that I was involved in over 25 years ago now was a project called What's Your Story? And that was initiated by an artist called Kathleen Little with homeless people across Glasgow. So I supported workshops in hostels across the city. The work was then featured and displayed in Central Station, as well as at Street Level itself. We've worked a lot with schools and young people, exhibiting work in the schools themselves, in the gallery and in public locations across Glasgow. So that sharing of skills, exhibiting in multiple locations, keeping it local, but also bringing it into the centre have always been really important. We've supported residencies, both from the gallery, this is Kenny Bean, and also in the community. This is at Van Clooster, working with an adult resource centre, and the exhibition in that context was in the community gardens. We sometimes work with the artist on our gallery programme to do additional creative workshops with groups. This is Peter Kennard, working with a local community group in response to the exhibition themes. We also sometimes partner with other organisations that are working on areas of social inequality. So this was with the Anti-Poverty Alliance and working with a range of community groups affected by poverty to create an exhibition that opened. It was the first community exhibition in the new Scottish Parliament building. Community, working with communities isn't always about place, it's about shared experience. And we've done numerous projects over the last 20 years with refugees in Glasgow, working with filmmakers and artists, sharing stories and skills to document life, and also to share and celebrate culture through a whole range of things, from different cultural traditions to civic events. This is the West End Carnival back in the day, and representations of the Red Road Flats there, events at the gallery itself, and also interventions locally, as well as bringing together different parts of communities from both different aspects of the community, but also people who've lived in a place across different points in time. All about celebrating place and locality. This is actually an early image from multi-story project back in 2005. And this is one of Bash Khan's images, Ibrahim and Globe. This is another one of Bash's works with us in those early days from a series called Waiting Rooms. I think he's going to talk a little bit about that. We also work with other organisations, non-arts organisations and government bodies, all with the aim of increasing equalities. This is UNIS, which is a refugee-led support group, which stands for United Nations in Scotland, being awarded a prize by Humza Yousaf, MSP, and joined with the community police. This is an International Women's Day event that we supported at the gallery for a refugee-led organisation, the International Women's Group. And we also support different groups in sharing really poignant and important elements of history. This is a long-term project with the African and Caribbean Women's Association in Scotland, documenting women's experiences of coming to Scotland over 7 decades. Events are a really big part of that, with multiple partnerships. This is with the Glasgow Women's Library, launching the first edition of the book. Food is very important, music is very important in these events, as is longevity. This was the final 2nd volume of that publication that was launched actually online during lockdown last year. This is a little snapshot of some postcards from Elisa Stack's residency in Shettleston back in 2008, just prior to COVID, working in Shettleston across the community with different groups, and a really poignant reminder of how what is there currently can soon become history. She worked with some of the women from the McVitie's Biscuit Factory, which was one of the casualties of, well, potentially one of the casualties of the pandemic, and looks to go into liquidation. And right up to the present day, and this is documentation actually from last year, from Simon Murphy's first Govanhill project. This is a long-term project Simon's been doing for the last 20 years. And this was part of Govanhill International Festival, and is again this year with Street Level 2, exhibiting some of his fabulous community portraits in the community itself and creating a photography trail. So that is a very whiz tour of some of the ways in which Street Level work with communities and have done over the last 30 years. I'm going to end, before I start on the introductions to the Culture Collective project, with just this wee quote from an audience from the Commons book at an exhibition opening in 2005, which was launching our multi-story programme. And it's not the best of writing, but here we can see this is art that makes a difference to the people who are involved and the people who see it. Fantastic work, well done. And I think that is really a good point to introduce the Culture Collective project, because it's very much at the heart of the ambition of the project itself, of the overall programme, and our project as well. So to give a little context to the Culture Collective project and what it is, Creative Scotland, with Scottish Government emergency COVID relief funds, launched the Culture Collective pilot programme last year to support creative practitioners, organisations and communities to work together across Scotland to help shape the future of local cultural life. The programme focus is on community engaged creative activity, supporting 26 lead organisations in Scotland to work collaboratively to develop ways of responding to the ongoing impacts of the pandemic and establish a network of creative practitioners, organisations and communities working together to create a positive difference locally and nationally. So it's a great pleasure to invite Bash and Morwenna to join me. That was a whistle-stop tour of just a little background information. Obviously, tonight's event really is about introducing you two and your approach and your practice as you've developed it both over many, many years. I guess I could just say a little bit more about Street Level's overarching programme. So Bash and Morwenna are both lead artists in respectively the Gorbals and Govanhill, and they will work with a support artist. And we have Stella Rooney in the Gorbals and Alex Poper in Govanhill, supported by Tia Macon at Street Level. So we have a team of 5 artists that will all be working together with the community on this. Exactly how it looks, we don't know yet. That is all to be developed. But the main aims within the project are to engage the partners and community to remove barriers to participation in culture, to celebrate people's resilience and amplify grassroots work, and to support people to explore creative ways to visualize their experiences and share their stories, responding to places of theme, regeneration, and reimagining futures. I am going to just hand over to Morwenna to go first. But Morwenna is a graduate of Naples University in Edinburgh with a BA in photography, film and imaging, and an MA from Glasgow School of Art and Fine Art. For the past 10 years, she's developed her collaborative practice across a range of settings with a diverse spectrum of people via workshops, night classes, community-based projects, supporting many people who face barriers to accessing the arts. Her projects have included A Seat at the Table with the National Galleries of Scotland and Action for Children, a 2-year heritage arts project working with culturally diverse young women, Every Woman's Superwoman with Young Shahelia, Glasgow Women's Library and Stills, a project working with young women from ethnic backgrounds looking at feminist film and photography, and Talking About the Past, a Roots Heritage project with West Lothian Council involving young people to explore the heritage and migration of people into the region by recording and investigating the stories, accents, and dialects of the people that live there. Alongside her collective work, she teaches analogue photography and has exhibited her own work across Scotland and Europe, with her studio based in Govanhill for the last 6 years. Okay, enough from me. It's a real delight to pass over to Morwenna Kearsley.
Great, well, thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction, and also it was just really lovely to see all that, all the Street Level's work. This is the first time I'll be working with Street Level, so I'm really excited about that. As Iseult said, my name's Morwenna. I'm an artist. I work mainly with photography and moving image, and over the last kind of 10 years, I've worked on lots and lots of collaborative community projects with groups of people of all ages and from all backgrounds. And I thought what I would do tonight, I have a tendency to ramble, so I'm going to try and keep to time. And what I thought I could do is just talk about 3 projects, and hopefully that I've been involved in. And hopefully that will provide a bit of insight into my approach to this kind of work. Okay, so this absolutely incredible image comes from a project called Every Woman Superwoman, and that's the umbrella title for a project between Young Shahelia, Stills, Edinburgh Arts Festival and Glasgow Women's Library. And this image was taken by one of the participants. I just want to say a little bit about the partners. So I was invited onto this project by Claire Cochrane, who is a creative learning manager at Stills, which is a photographic gallery and resource in Edinburgh. And they were developing a project with Edinburgh Arts Festival, working with Young Shahelia. Young Shahelia is a support agency. They offer support to young women aged between 12 and 25, majority Black, minority ethnic young women that they work with. So they have offices in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and we were working specifically with a group in Edinburgh. This picture kind of exemplifies why I think photography is such a perfect medium for collaborative community projects, mainly because it's accessible. Most people, not all, but most people have access in this part of the world to a smartphone, to a camera phone, and most people take pictures every single day. photography is also, you know, you don't need a specialized set of skills, but the medium is kind of broad enough so that you can acquire extra, more complex skills if you want to further on down the line. So the theme of this project, which was put in place kind of before I was invited onto it, responded to the exhibition that was on at Stills at the time. And it was an exhibition about Joe Spence. So I'm sure loads of you, most of you know the work of Joe Spence. If not, I'd highly recommend you give it a Google after this. So Joe Spence left behind an incredibly complex, interesting body of photographic work. But what we were looking at, what interested us most for this project, was the ways in which she used photography to challenge dominant representations of labour, class, gender and sexuality. And this was apparent in the work that was being displayed at Stills. But also for me, Jo Spence is a kind of touchstone artist because of her absolute real commitment to giving people access to information and to equipment so that the people themselves could record their own experiences and their own lives. And that's really at the root of what most artists that work in community projects try to do, and certainly it's what I try to echo in my own practice as well. So here are some of the young women. We were looking at media representation. So we were kind of asking each other, has much changed between this work of Jo Spence's made in the 1980s to now, 2016? Could these young women see representations of themselves in the media? And how could they use photography to disrupt those representations? So I want to talk about kind of the idea of a photo walk. I can't admit, it was probably Claire's idea, actually, somebody's idea, to start this whole project with a series of photo walks. And for me, this was kind of the first project where we really focused on that in the beginning, and it's something that I followed through in all consequent projects. So we took walks together. So sometimes we'd walk from Young Sahelia to Stills, sometimes the other way. And photo walks are such a great way to kind of get used to each other, get to know each other, and also get to know the equipment, get to know how to use an SLR. Sometimes people want to learn technical skills, like how to use an SLR on a manual setting. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes people just want to have it on automatic and just use it as a vehicle to look through, to look at the familiar in an unfamiliar way. So that's what we did. And in particular, on these photo walks, we were looking at self-portraiture. So looking for reflective parts of the city and making self-portraits in that way, making ourselves visible in the city. And I hope you agree with me that most of the images that were produced by this group of young women are brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I think this is a good point or a good time to point out that my role, what I do in these projects is, because I've had the privilege and benefit of arts education, I bring equipment, I bring resources, I bring information to the group, and the group also bring their expertise. So they bring stories about their life, they bring expertise in lots of different areas, and the purpose of getting together as a group is to share those skills together, rather than a kind of hierarchical system where I am the teacher and they are learning. It's not like that at all. And I can tell you for a fact that I have learned way more from the people that I work with than probably they have learned from me. And these two images are a great example. I go back to look at these images quite regularly just to enjoy them as artworks. They're beautiful pictures. Another thing that I try and do on almost every project, if I can, is to give people the opportunity to work with analog photography, specifically to work in a dark room. And the reason I do that is when I'm working with young people, most of the time it's the first time they've ever been inside a darkroom before. They might have seen it on the telly or in films, but they've never actually been inside the red light of a darkroom. So it's really special. And for when I'm working with older people, sometimes it's a wee trip down memory lane. Maybe they have experienced analog photography in their youth, and it's a way to go back to it. Most importantly, the reason for using analog is about anticipation. So with digital, you make a picture, you see it instantly. With analog, there's space and time between making the photograph or taking it and then seeing it. And that's quite an important distinction. And it's an experience that we try and give people as much as possible. And obviously Stills is equipped with a beautiful set of darkrooms, just like street level. So we were able to work in, the most amazing resources. And here's some more examples of absolutely beautiful composite photograms that the young women made. And really these sessions, they're about experimentation, exploration, and most importantly, they're supposed to be fun, like a lot of the time these projects can bring up really kind of emotional, sensitive issues. And, having fun and having a laugh is like a really important part of being able to talk through the more kind of serious stuff as well. Another thing I do a lot, I think, in all projects, because I work this way in my own personal work as well, I like to use collage as much as possible. So again, when you're making a photograph using a camera, you're constructing an image, and when you're using collage, you're deconstructing an image. And I think it's really important to be able to rip up photographs and to have your hands on them, and particularly for this project, which was all about how young women or women are presented in the media. I felt it was we felt it was really important to be able to rip them up. And what does it mean to rip up a photograph of yourself? What does it mean to insert yourself into an existing other artwork? So all of these kind of methods are the first part of a discussion that goes a lot deeper than just the method itself. We also, I should say, I don't have an image of it, but we had an exhibition of a lot of this work at the Glasgow Women's Library, which was absolutely brilliant. Okay, I'm doing all right for time. So the next project I want to talk about is talking about my past. And this was a project that was developed by Len McAffer, and he is one of the arts development officers for West Lothian Council, and he was working in partnership with Youth Action. So quite similar to Young Sahelia, Youth Action is a service that provides support to young people throughout West Lothian. And the project was funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So this project, again, as well, already had a theme before I came on board. And that theme was developed by Len with young people. So he was asking them, well, what interests you? What do you want to do a project about? And what came out of those discussions was a project that explored the legacy and migration of people into West Lothian by recording and investigating the stories, accents, and dialects of the folk that lived there. So basically it was about language. And I don't think it's ever happened to me since, but it was a brilliant experience. When I was interviewed for this job, I was not only interviewed by Len and by Helen Davis, who's the director of Youth Action, but by a panel of young people who were going to be part of the project. And that was brilliant because they could ask me questions directly and I could speak to them directly. So I thought that was it was a really good grounding to the project. Yeah, so basically I worked with groups in 3 locations, and it's important to say they're existing youth groups, and I would go in one evening a week to each of the 3 locations and work with them. So the locations were Broxburn, Armadale and Craigshill. And again, the way we started was with photo walks. Although this time the photo walks were a wee bit different, because this time I was the stranger, you know. I didn't know that. I knew Broxbourne a wee bit, but I wasn't really that familiar with Armadale or Craigshill. So the photo walks, I just went with cameras, and the photo walks were a way for the young folk to show me around. So they took me to like the places they hang out, they showed me their schools, the place where they lived, they took me to places that they probably shouldn't have taken me to. It was brilliant because they had control of the situation. And we were all making photographs as we walked and kind of getting to know each other a little bit more. And as a result, these absolutely brilliant photos came out of it. I say again, I've been making photographs since I was a young teenager. And I'm always kind of, it knocks my confidence looking at the work of these young people, because it's so much better than my own in most cases, which is beautiful to see. So in Broxbourne, what we did was, although the overarching theme was there about language and dialect, part of my job, as I see it, is it's my responsibility to worry about the theme and the outcome. And really what I need to do is to listen to the group of people that I'm working with and listen to what they want to do, what inspires them, what motivates them. And then I find a way to weave the theme into what we're doing. So I kind of take on that kind of stress of outcome. And in this case, in Broxbourne, they kind of forensically photographed, like kind of Stanley Kubrick style, the main street and Broxbourne. So what they ended up doing was making a video where it was like a kind of animated walkthrough of Broxbourne High Street, and you could see all their photographs on these kind of animated billboards. And then it was a soundscape of them talking about language and talking about times where they feel they have to moderate their language, and times where they can speak openly in their given language. In Armadale, it turned out that it was a much bigger group, and a lot of them were really into drama. And some of them were into makeup, particularly special effects makeup. Some of them were into hairdressing. Some of them liked photography, but it was a big, big mix. So we kind of came to the conclusion that maybe a good idea was that they wanted to make basically a narrative film, a very short narrative video. And they came up with this idea. The idea was that a curse had been put on Armadale one night, and the curse meant that they all lost their voices, and the only way that they could reclaim their voices was to use their actual language. So not to modify their language into standard English, but to use the words and phrases of their area with pride, and then the curse would be lifted. So it's amazing. They came up with that completely on their own. And we were also lucky enough to work with actor and writer Gowan Calder, and she came and did rehearsals with them and helped them with script development. And all around, all the time, we were making pictures and kind of collating an archive of work. The last group, Craigshill, already had an existing and very successful music group. And so it became evident pretty quickly that what I would need to do is make sure that they could incorporate music into their video work. And so we did lots of workshops based on Kandinsky's idea of synesthesia. So we would listen to music that we liked and then collectively draw what we heard. And slowly over time, we developed that into pictures. And what the group decided they wanted to do was basically make a concept album. So they made a 5-track concept album in video form, where they blended music and photography with conversations about how they felt about language and how their language was changing and in flux all the time. Again, we also gave them disposable cameras. This time there was more emphasis on them taking them home as well. So as a result, you got these like incredibly intimate, beautiful set of pictures that came out of the disposable cameras. They also came to Stills and did a darkroom session with me there, which was something that I was really pleased to be able to offer. Okay, I'm going to hurry up a little bit. We also got, we also did things, right, that I try and bring this into all my workshops. Someone in the group told me that they didn't like their art classes at school because they weren't allowed to trace and they didn't feel like they were good enough. They didn't like drawing freehand. So we did a whole session where they just traced stuff, because I'm not a teacher and this is not a school. So we get to kind of bypass those rules and regulations that you get in schools. So we did a whole session where I brought in these Liechtenstein prints, and basically the aim of the session was to replace the speech in the speech bubble with how they talk. And there was some hilarious, brilliant artworks that came. This is the most kind of public friendly one. There were some that were a bit ruder that are very funny. But yeah, great. I think this is a great example here. And we also made a lot of collage work where they would then kind of write in their memories of that specific place as well. Okay, I'm going to move on a little bit. And then part of our presentation at the end was this new dictionary that we made up. Or when I say we, I mean they. So throughout all the weeks, this project was supposed to be 4 to 6 months, but I ended up working there for about a year and a half. So over all that time, we'd collect all these phrases and words that came up, and we collected them on big flip charts, and then they were collated by a designer into this. And it's really interesting because you can see West Lothian obviously has got Edinburgh to the east, Glasgow to the west, and as a result, you see the influence of, I would say, like East Coast words and West Coast words kind of coming together in this really beautiful way. And this was the presentation of the films at the Howden Centre in Livingston. We presented the films as a kind of as a triangle, with 3 different projections for the 3 different films. And it was amazing. We had everybody there. We had the local councillors, the local fire chief. Most importantly, we had grannies, mums, dads, siblings, and the young folk got to see their work presented in, you know, the most professional, high-end way that we could. And it was a really beautiful celebration. Okay, I'm going to go through this very quickly. I'll just be another 2 minutes. This is the last project I'm going to talk about, and this is Picture in Paisley. This is the most recent project that I did, and it's part of the regeneration programme in Paisley. And again, the theme was preset before I came on board, and it was to look at Paisley's history of textile and thread manufacturing through the built environment. And this is really the first time that I've shown my own work alongside the participants' work. And that basically has been because in the past, because of the way sometimes these projects have to be, I would rather kind of foreground the work of the people that I'm working with rather than my own. I get to exhibit quite regularly, and a lot of the people I work with don't. But in this case, it was more of a residency. So both our work blended together. And what I really want to say, the point I want to make really about this is we got to do a lot of archive visits. So to the University of Glasgow archive, the Secret Museum, and all of these places. So here's a little picture from a trip. But what I wanted to say is, this gentleman here in the magenta shirt, this is John Brennan, and he is a member of the Disability Resource Centre, which is one of the groups I worked with. And I have to say, I learned so much about Paisley's history from all the people I worked with on this project, way more than in any of my prior research. And John is an example of a real local archivist. He knows everything. And it was quite interesting to me to reflect on the different roles or the way society sees these people very differently. John, and this is Claire McDade, who's an archivist at the University of Glasgow. So these projects can be a way, again, for the artist to soak up as much knowledge as possible. And you end up meeting these people that are so qualified and so well versed in what they're talking about. And again, my role is to bring ways of making that they might not have thought about. So for instance, I showed them all Andy Warhol's images where he'd sewn together images and sewn onto images. And we used that to create these word poems that you'll see on the right-hand side. And I'm just going to show you a few pictures of we did a couple of exhibitions at the Pop Centre in the shopping centre in Paisley. And look at that on the right hand side. One of the participants, Christine, made this cake and brought it along. That is a first for me. Absolutely amazing. And the last thing I want to say is that because of COVID, we couldn't have our final exhibition that was going to bring all 3 groups together. The groups, by the way, were Disability Resource Centre in Paisley, College of West Scotland, and Outspoken Arts. So we made a film instead, and you can see it if you want on my Vimeo. I've circled the wee Vimeo number there. So I'd urge you, if there's anything about what I've said interests you, have a wee look at our video. And it's a combination of showcasing all the work we made and interviews with the participants. And I'm going to end on another absolutely beautiful image that was made by Christopher on this project. And thanks for listening. And yeah, that's it.
Thanks for Morwenna, that was fantastic. Really great, really great. Whew, and a bit of a whiz through. Hopefully we'll have a wee bit of time at the end to kind of come back. I've certainly got some kind of questions there, around the whole value and working practice. And hopefully we'll get some through Facebook too. So that's also just to remind the audience out there that if you've got any questions or comments from the artists, please do pop them in the chat, and we'll have a bit of time at the end to go through those. So without any further ado, it's a really great pleasure to introduce Bash Khan. Bash is the creative director of Basharat Creative. He's a filmmaker, visual artist, and has developed a really diverse body of work over the last 15 years. Working across documentary, short films, performance, music videos, and installation work. Collaboration is at the heart of all his work, as is community. The possibility of discovery, new learnings, and sharing with others is what drives his work and approach. His process around projection work in the public realm is to explore the connection between people, place, and public realm. Just a few of the projects Bash has undertaken recently. He screened a documentary about Norfolk Court in the Gorbals outside the building itself, curated outdoor installation as part of the Albert Drive project, where documentaries of the communities were screened in the local shops through fixed monitors. He's activated disused arches in the Gorbals to showcase films as part of the Radical Film Festival, and Gorbals portraits as part of the Lauriston Arts Strategy and Regeneration at the Gorbals Health Centre. He's created over 200 portraits of the community as a permanent video installation in the new health centre. In 2018, he was filmmaker in resident at Scotland and the Venice Biennale, exploring themes of free space as experienced by migrants, young people and families in Venice through outdoor projection in public plazas and historic Venetian buildings. Most recently, he's been working on a project called On the Edge, exploring the role of key workers in Glasgow as a visual art projection project with the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland's Fair Access Department, creating a series of large-scale outdoor video installations using creative portraiture, performance to explore the role of key workers, teachers, artists, and other people that have made a significant contribution to our lives and community in these testing times. Bash, over to you.
Thank you very much, Iseult. That's great. And thank you to Morwenna as well for sharing her practice and her work. It was really, really amazing to see. Hello to everyone out there in the internet. My name is Bash, as Iseult mentioned. So yeah, it's kind of interesting thinking. Iseult mentioned that, of course, one of the projects in Red Road was 15 years. So when I was kind of prepping this talk, I kind of thought it'd be an interesting thing to see how that process, which started about 15 years ago, we started with street level, how those early kind of workshops formed a lot of ideas, formed main elements of my practice, which have kind of fed into my work to this day. So it's almost like going back in time and how my process started. So I'm going to take you down maybe that route about some of the projects we've done. And yeah, some of the kind of stuff that I've maybe learned by working with communities, working with certain art projects, things that I felt that have worked and things maybe I felt have not worked as well. And how I've maybe tried to address that in my own work. So I hope you can see that. You can see some images there on the side. I started off, photography was and is my first love. And over the years, I've kind of explored filmmaking, documentaries, and also then trying to combine some of those elements of, photography and film, which has led into the projection work. So yeah, as artists, I think we like to explore what are the possibilities, what are the things that can be done with this medium, and also what this medium actually entails, the power of images. So yeah, in terms of my early kind of practice, in terms of my engagement practice, I've been involved in a range of visual art projects right around Glasgow. I've worked in North Glasgow, in Springburn, in the south, Gorbals, Govanhill, Pollock Shields, out in the East End, out in the West. And so I've kind of got to know Glasgow really well through a lot of these engagement projects, which involve using photography, using film, and at the heart of it, it's to give people the agency to have control or control of their own image and their own stories, and to encourage those stories to come forward, which we might not normally hear. And of course, my own passion is to discover those stories and how we can also present a more nuanced way of who we actually are. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think photography is so powerful. It can really form our ideas of ourselves and so-called the others. And I think for me, really, I want, using photography and imagery and the power of that, and get our communities to think of themselves in different ways. I think this is a key part of this process. And I'll kind of come back to this one about how that's formed into my most recent work. But I'm going to take you back 15 years ago, where I first kind of started in running photography workshops, and it was with Street Level, and it was with Iseult as well. And I just left college, and as most colleges and educational establishments, they kind of throw you out in the big bad world without giving you any idea of where you might kind of go. And I consider myself very fortunate that I got this chance to work with Street Level in the Red Road multi-story project. And that was really my first exposure in terms of the role social photography can play in working with diverse communities and exploring themes of asylum, identity. So this kind of process, running these photography workshops really kind of opened up my mind, and also what role photography could play, especially in my own practice and in my own career. It was a pivotal moment, and these photographs that you see at the moment were inspired by discussions around the people we're working with. These are a response to the perception and the reports that were going around at that time that asylum seekers were getting fully furnished flats with the best furniture, with new washing machines, with everything. And when you kind of work in that space, you realize the reality is different. And then you also realize the power of these negative stories, how they portray certain images, how that can seep into kind of society and alter people's perceptions. So these images were really to kind of look at that idea of presenting these waiting rooms where, people would wait for an indefinite time until they discovered where they could go and who they could be. So in these images, people are quite faceless, nameless. This was both to protect the people's identities, as was their wish, and also to kind of show that their situation, I suppose, within the place that they're in, without having any real identity for themselves. And the reason why I think this was a big kind of moment for me, especially, was this was a moment where I thought beyond photography. The experience of working with people and engaging in a lot of these workshops is actually conversations, it's workshops, it's conversations and chats with people. And you realize the kind of, the tsunami of stories and the kind of experiences, and powerful and inspirational and moving. And I just kind of wondered, how could we get those stories out? How can we represent those stories so that we can at least challenge those narratives that were coming out from certain elements of the press? So this was a moment where I thought about film, and I thought about documentary, and I thought about how you can combine and represent people's images and their voices, and using that as a tool. So that really was a moment to kind of, move on from that process. And so then, since then, I was lucky enough to have some fantastic experiences working with a range of kind of cultural organisations in Glasgow, Project Ability, Glasgow Media Access Centre, where we used a combination of photography and film to engage a real diverse range of people who, like myself, would not have maybe accessed the arts that much, or felt that was a world for them. And that probably, that process has carried on to this day, where I work with a range of young people, young kids and big kids and old kids, that's what I call them. And in the heart of it, I just kind of feel that it's about being at least in control of your own stories. I think with social media and mobile phones and everything, we've become such consumers of stories, excessive consumers, sometimes too much. And really thinking about how we use these tools to get people to be the creator of their stories. And I think that's the real role of film and photography and film, to get people start thinking, to be creators of their stories and be in control of their narratives. So this kind of process in terms of thinking about people and place took another step forward when I was going over to Pakistan, and I really wanted to kind of make some work around that place. And I kind of thought about certain themes to explore. So what I initially thought about was, I thought about terrorism, and I thought about corruption, and I thought about third world poverty. I thought about all those things. And then I realized that I didn't think about humanity or culture or love or heritage or colonialism. And I very clearly realized at that moment that, of course, that I kind of had to check myself and realize that even I had been affected by negative stereotypes of a place. And I kind of thought that can happen to me with someone who's got a connection to that place. That can happen to any of us. And I realized then that the power of imagery, the power of stories that we tell of a place has a massive, massive impact, it's a massive effect. And I'm really now kind of in that essence of how we use those stories for for positive reflections and positive kind of images. So we start thinking of ourselves in a different way. So with this idea in mind, for Pakistan, I realized then that actually I was bringing my take, I was bringing my perception on a people and place. And maybe, well, not maybe, what I decided to do was I decided not to go with a plan. And I decided that I would not go with my preconceived ideas, but I would ask people themselves of what story I should tell of that place. I'll let them lead that narrative, you know, so it becomes hopefully maybe a bit more authentic and a bit more honest to represent people and place. So from this one, I'm lucky enough through this process, and I think, you know, as artists, we do follow intuition, and there's a process of serendipity here as well. This is where I managed to find a taxi driver who'd written his book, his first book about his experience. And that process of serendipity took me from one story to another, where I started to discover another element of the story, where people didn't talk about corruption, they didn't talk about war or terrorism, but they talked about their passion for truckers, about their life in a local shop. And so I let them drive that narrative for this film. And I think this was a moment where I realized that representation of people and place has got to be very carefully thought about. And I started to implement that thought process into any project that I start to do, about asking people how would they want to be represented, in what kind of way, what kind of story that would do, that would benefit them rather than potentially some other motive or some other kind of angle. So that was, and then from this one, a short, a film called Taxi Through Pakistan was made, and it's been, exhibited and screened in a few different places. Currently, it's also on Jupiter Artland as part of a Reset exhibition, and it's also available on my Vimeo. If you have 49 minutes, then you can go and catch it on that page. So this kind of process of representation brought me back to the Gorbals. Now, I've had a very long relationship with the Gorbals over the last 10 years. And again, A View From Here was one of the amazing projects to be involved in, where we were working with two diverse communities in Gorbals and Knightswood, and looking at the experience of people who live in high-rise flats, both from the perspective of migrants, refugees, and local Scots, and how to represent that range and diversity of stories that exist in this one space. So this is a little range of some of the films that we made in and around Gorbals to tell the story, and Knightswood, to tell the story of that place. What was most important for me for A View From Here, and again, I'm going to talk about things that may be specific to how the process has developed. I was also very conscious that on some other previous projects that I'd been involved in, where we did great work with community groups, if that was through photography or film work, but then sometimes there was a disconnect between where the work would take place and where it was screened at the end. And normally that wasn't the same place. Normally it was, a centralized location. And really, I felt that this kind of impacted real meaningful engagement. When we talk about meaningful engagement with audiences and we want people to engage with certain artworks, then we've got to make sure that it's in a place that's accessible for them. So from that kind of mindset, I was quite kind of conscious that I really wanted to bring the film that was made in the Gorbals back into the area there. So then the people involved there, their neighbours, their family, their friend, they could watch them as well. So from that one, we managed to kind of screen the documentary itself in front of Norfolk Court. And this was potentially maybe about 3 months before that building actually got demolished itself. And one of the kind of most remarkable kind of experiences I had from this moment was, there was a local mother appeared at the event, and she kind of said, my son told me this event's happening. I've just come down to watch it. I haven't got much time. I've got to kind of go. So hurry up. And so eventually when we kind of got going, and there's quite a few, I think it was 2 or 3 films. And after the event, I looked around and 45, 50 minutes later, she was still there, still watching it, still engaged and still kind of intrigued by this event that was taking place. And I think that these kind of outdoor events for me became really important for 2 things. One was, to engage audiences, but also these things become hopefully memorable for people. I think these events are, they mark a specific kind of time and place for people. So really, and then really at that moment onwards, that idea, I kept thinking not just about the work that I was making, but also where would that work be shown to kind of really maximize or engage audiences in a new kind of way. So I implemented this idea in various projects that I've been involved in since A View From Here, which includes the Albert Drive project. And what we did with the Albert Drive project was, as Iseult mentioned earlier on, I'm going to show you a very quick little wee clip for this. I'll turn this volume down. So again, the Albert Drive project was designed for, it was kind of an idea, how do we get our neighbours to know each other? And, you know, so what I'd kind of decided to do was working closely with the community and working with the local shops. And I think local shops is another one of my main passions. I think they're essentially key for vibrant communities, for people to know about you, to know about your neighbours. So I approached a lot of local shops in the streets and asked them if I could install TVs that would showcase the stories of neighbours, as you know, people that lived around the corner. So as you went for your cake, or if you went to kind of get your loaf or your bananas, you would hear the story of Noman in that place. You would hear the story of Mr. Shafiq. So you'd hear the stories of your neighbours in the place that you visit every day. And again, I suppose this was also a kind of a response, because at that point there was a conversation around the tramway wanted to engage with the wider community in Pollokshields that they maybe felt did not engage with the tramways programme. And I really felt that in that case, the museums and exhibition spaces, they've got to create a two-way conversation with the audiences and with local communities or hard to reach audiences. And I felt that this was one way that you create that conversation, that you ask the tramway and other organisations to be interested in their local community and hopefully invest in projects in there itself. So this is where Albert Drive, so yeah, this was kind of the Delicious 2 bakery that was used, and that's where the films were shared with the neighbours of Albert Drive. I've got no idea of the time, because like Morwenna said, we have got a tendency to ramble on, and I'm rambling on much, probably more, but it's part of the process, so I think you just have to live with it. I'm just going to, oh, sorry. I'm going to just take you back to a couple of quick images here again. So really, where am I? That's Albert Drive. Okay, and I suppose I'm just going to take you on to some of the kind of most kind of recent work, but I was talking really about how we think about the public realm in terms of how we use those spaces for, for interventions, for exhibitions and shows. And as mentioned, I was lucky enough to be invited for the Scotland Venice project in 2017, the Happenstance project created by Weir Particle. And the theme was around free space. And of course, in most of my projects, my work, of course, diversity and making sure that we get a range of voices represented is essentially key. So during my time in Venice, we got to spend some amazing time and get to see this amazing kind of places. But what we very quickly realized was that the people that are at the heart of supporting a city or an economy, which is young people, students, migrants, people that really kind of work, families as well, that actually they were not able to afford to live in the city anymore. It's just getting so expensive and so kind of distracted. So what I really wanted to do was to kind of present these kind of, these are actually video portraits. So my process moved on from still photography and portraits into video portraits. And I documented a whole range of people that I felt were on the edge of that society, that were not kind of given their due. People from diverse communities, I think, right around the world are never given the right due. So I wanted to kind of give them their space alongside this little project. So I kind of did a whole combination of photography, and I said this is all about exploring the range and diversity of people that you meet, and also this idea of how we define the others, you know, who are the others in that way. And so all I do is I present these video portraits, and they're done in a style of a portrait, but it's done in video. There's no talking, it's not an interview, but all I really want to see is I want to see that kind of that life, you know, I want to see that kind of people breathing, sighing, smiling. And eventually they reveal something within themselves, because, you know, I get to film from about a minute or so, or 2 minutes. And after a while, it's just this lovely little feeling that comes through. And I just want to maybe share a little short clip with that, and then I will wrap up in a very short while. And the reason I'm showing you this work is that this is kind of becoming potentially an integral part of one of my kind of processes about how do we kind of present artwork, how do we present shows in a post-COVID world, when our kind of relationship or question of outdoor spaces, you know, how can we reclaim those spaces for people in the community, which is the key thing. And one way that I feel we can do that is using projection work, is to change the image and narrative of a place through positive imagery, positive portraits. This was the public projections out on the Venetian buildings. And yeah, I just kind of said, you know, you'll notice there's a lot of portraiture in my work, and I really enjoy working with people. I think it's the best, inspiring kind of experience that you'll ever have. You know, people's stories and personalities, and they're amazing. And I think that collaborative element is consistently in my process. Without people and their stories and their inspiration, we have nothing. And I think that's what always intrigues me about any place, that there's stories to be discovered. You know, everyone's got a story to tell. I'm a passionate believer in that one. So yeah, so this was a little wee kind of oversight into the others, the public projection in Venice. And I'm just going to finish up just very quickly again with the Gorbals, okay? Because the Gorbals is at the heart of all these things. So I've taken that process also back into the Gorbals, where we again have done these large-scale projections of video portraits of everyday people, just people from the area. And this was actually on the site where, of course, Norfolk Court was. So from a view from here, this was one of the second kind of projects that we kind of done. We've done film projection events within the arches that were in the Gorbals. And most recently, I also kind of got a chance to kind of photograph and document local heroes that were nominated by the community, people that had kind of made a difference to their communities. And I personally believe this is where I maybe want to end the conversation potentially at, which is about how we change the narrative of our cities. There's certain perceptions, I think, that get repeated again and again, if it's about the north or the east or the south of Glasgow, wherever it is. And I personally feel that we've got to change that narrative. And I think one way photography can do that one, it can give people an idea of seeing a different reflection of who they are. And this image here, this project here, is one of the key things that I kind of noticed, and I've noticed this wherever I've been around Glasgow, wherever I asked to photograph people, they always say, oh, no me, son, I don't take a good picture. And I hear this so often, I hear this all the time, consistently around Glasgow, and I question, I goes, where does that come from? I kind of imagine to myself, would an American person say that? Would a French person say that? Would someone from Australia or India or whatever, would they actually say, I don't take a good picture? What is this thing that we have in Glasgow, or is it Scotland, that says we don't take a good picture? And I think people are beautiful. I think people are amazing. And I think we need to change that narrative itself. I think we need to start saying we take a good picture. And if we can start saying that one, maybe the young generation coming up can start looking at themselves in a different way, start looking at their communities in a different way, as inspiring places, but with inspiring people. And that may start thinking about, and I said, change the narrative of what these places represent. And that's the thing with the power of photography and the power of storytelling can do. And I think that's what I'm always hoping to do in my work, is to kind of get more joyous celebration, energy of communities and people, and to celebrate them. And I think that's why I really enjoy doing it, celebrating communities and people, and hope to make work with them.
Thanks, Bash. I mean, we were billed for an hour. There's still some people hanging in there watching, I think.
Oh, okay.
But it's possible. I mean, the wonderful thing about this program is, it's a 12 months long. And I think within that, it's going to give us the opportunity to have a lot of conversations. We're going to get to see, loads more of your work, and the new work that's going to come out of you both being based in the respective communities, which is a couple of comments have come through already saying, how amazing people have found your presentations and how they can't wait to see what develops over the next 12 months.
I think the project is exciting, and that thing of, with most artists, we start off with a process of, okay, we don't know where this is going, and I think that's very exciting. And I think being open to those possibilities is, I think and I think this is kind of a project looking very specifically at how we do realign ourselves again in our communities, and how we can just create something different. And I also I'm a passionate believer that we sometimes get stuck in heritage as an old thing. That's heritage is only something that looked back at 15, 20 years ago. But how do you document, or how do you kind of record that heritage that's happening right now, and for audiences now, but also for 3 years or 5 years, 10 years down the line. So I think there's just, and I think this project gives both the time and space, and hopefully the kind of, the community engagement to kind of build something really quite interesting. And I think that's a nice challenge for me to have as well, to kind of go, because it's about resetting or rethinking about your own practice and process. So I'm just quite excited about this.
Yeah, same. I would echo that. I'm very excited to start this project, and I think one of the reasons why I was highlighting that those 3 projects had a theme, and that was for many reasons, mainly to do with funding, I would imagine. The fact that this project doesn't have a theme, and we are exploring it together with the people, with the groups that we're going to meet, is something that's really unusual and really valuable. And thinking about, we all know Govanhill, I mean, it's such a vibrant, diverse neighborhood with tons of energy. So I can't wait to meet more people, basically, and to build the project together with the people that I meet, and I see what comes out.